and of this 1,000, the greater number are not indigenous. Many of them have been brought from Central Africa by the river. Birds and winds have continued the work, and man himself has contributed his part in making it more complete. From Asia he has at different times brought wheat barley, the olive, the apple, the white or pink almond, and some 20 other species now acclimatized on the banks of the Nile. Marsh plants predominate in the delta, but the papyrus and the 3 varieties of blue, white, and pink lotus which once flourished there, being no longer cultivated, have now almost entirely disappeared, and reverted to their original habitats. The sycamore and the date palm, both importations from Central Africa, have better adapted themselves to their exile, and are now fully naturalized on Egyptian soil. The sycamore grows in sand on the edge of the desert as vigorously as in the midst of a well-watered country. Its roots go deep in search of water, which infiltrates as far as the gorges of the hills, and they absorb it freely, even where drought seems to reign supreme. The heavy, squat, gnarled trunk occasionally attains to colossal dimensions, without ever growing very high. Its rounded masses of compact foliage are so widespread that a single tree in the distance may give the impression of several grouped together, and its shade is dense and impenetrable to the sun. A striking contrast to the sycamore is presented by the date palm. Its round and slender stem rises uninterruptedly to a height of 13 to 16 yards. Its head is crowned with a cluster of flexible leaves arranged in 2 or 3 tiers, but so scanty, so pitilessly slit, that they fail to keep off the light, and cast but a slight and unrefreshing shadow. Few trees have so elegant an appearance, yet few are so monotonously elegant. There are palm trees to be seen on every hand, isolated, clustered by 2s and 3s at the mouths of ravines and about the villages, planted in regular file along the banks of the river like rows of columns, symmetrically arranged in plantations. These are the invariable background against which other trees are grouped, diversifying the landscape. The feathery tamarisk and the namp, the moringa, the carob, or locust tree, several varieties of acacia and mimosa, the sant, the mimosa habas, the white acacia, the acacia parnaxana, and the pomegranate tree, increase in number with the distance from the Mediterranean. The dry air of the valley is marvelously suited to them, but makes the tissue of their foliage hard and fibrous, imparting an aerial aspect, and such faded tints as are unknown to their growth in other climates. The greater number of these trees do not reproduce themselves spontaneously, and tend to disappear when neglected. The acacia seal, formerly abundant by the banks of the river, is now almost entirely confined to certain valleys of the Theban desert, along with a variety of the kerneled dome palm, of which a poetical description has come down to us from the ancient Egyptians. The common dome palm bifurcates at 8 or 10 yards from the ground. These branches are subdivided, and terminate in bunches of 20 to 30 palmate and fibrous leaves, 6 to 8 feet long. At the beginning of this century the tree was common in Upper Egypt, but is now becoming scarce, and we are within measurable distance of the time when its presence will be an exception north of the first cataract. Willows are decreasing in number, and the persea, one of the sacred trees of ancient Egypt, is now only to be found in gardens. None of the remaining tree species are common enough to grow in large clusters, and Egypt, reduced to her lofty groves of date palms, presents the singular spectacle of a country where there is no lack of trees, but an almost entire absence of shade. If Egypt is a land of imported flora, it is also a land of imported fauna, and all its animal species have been brought from neighboring countries. Some of these, as for example the horse and the camel, were only introduced at a comparatively recent period, 2000 to 1800 years before our era, the camel still later. The animals, such as the long and short-horned oxen, together with varieties of goats and dogs, are, like the plants, generally of African origin, and the ass of Egypt preserves an original purity of form and a vigor to which the European donkey has long been a stranger. The pig and the wild boar, the long-eared hare, the hedgehog, the ichneumon, the mufflon or maned sheep, innumerable gazelles, including the Egyptian gazelles, and antelopes with lyre-shaped horns, are as much West Asian as African, like the carnivores of all sizes, whose prey they are. The wild cat, the wolf, the jackal, the striped and spotted hyenas, the leopard, the panther, the hunting leopard, and the lion. On the other hand, most of the serpents, large and small, are indigenous. Some are harmless, like the colubers. Others are venomous, such as the soy-tail, the cerastes, the hajj viper, and the asp. The asp was worshipped by the Egyptians under the name of Aureus. It occasionally attains to a length of 6.5 feet, and when approached will erect its head and inflate its throat in readiness for darting forward. The bite is fatal, like that of the cerastes. Birds are literally struck down by the strength of the poison, while the great mammals, and man himself, almost invariably succumb to it after a longer or shorter death struggle. The Ureus is rarely found except in the desert or in the fields. The scorpion crawls everywhere, in desert and city alike, and if its sting is not always followed by death, it invariably causes terrible pain. Probably there were once several kinds of gigantic serpent in Egypt, analogous to the pythons of equatorial Africa. They are still to be seen in representations of funerary scenes, but not elsewhere, for like the elephant, the giraffe, and other animals which now only thrive far south, they had disappeared at the beginning of historic times. The hippopotamus long maintained its ground before returning to those equatorial regions whence it had been brought by the Nile. Common under the first dynasties, but afterwards withdrawing to the marshes of the Delta, it there continued to flourish up to the 13th century of our era. The crocodile, which came with it, has, like it also, been compelled to beat a retreat. Lord of the river throughout all ancient times, worshipped and protected in some provinces, excreted and prescribed in others, it might still be seen in the neighborhood of Cairo towards the beginning of our century. In 1840 it no longer passed beyond the neighborhood of Gebet et Ter, nor beyond that of Manfalut. 30 years later, Mariette asserted that it was steadily retreating before the guns of tourists and the disturbance which the regular passing of steamboats produced in the deep waters. Today, no one knows of a single crocodile existing below Aswan, but it continues to infest Nubia and the rocks of the First Cataract. One of them is occasionally carried down by the current into Egypt, where it is speedily dispatched by the fellahin, or by some traveller in quest of adventure. The fertility of the soil, and the vastness of the lakes and marshes, attract many migratory birds. Passerinae and palm pitties flock thither from all parts of the Mediterranean. Our European swallows, our quails, our geese, and wild ducks, our herons, to mention only the most familiar, come here to winter, sheltered from cold and inclement weather. End of Section 3. Chapter 1. The Nile and Egypt, Part 4. Even the non-migratory birds are really, for the most part, strangers acclimatized by long sojourn. Some of them, the turtle-dove, the magpie, the kingfisher, the partridge, and the sparrow, may be classed with our European species, while others betray their equatorial origin in the brightness of their colors. White and black ibises, red flamingos, pelicans, and cormorants enliven the waters of the river, and animate the reedy swamps of the delta in infinite variety. They are to be seen ranged in long files upon the sandbanks, fishing and basking in the sun. Suddenly the flock is seized with panic, rises heavily, and settles away further off. In hollows of the hills, eagle and falcon, the merlin, the bald-headed vulture, the kestrel, the golden sparrowhawk, find inaccessible retreats, whence they descend upon the plains like so many pillaging and well-armed barons. 1,000 little chattering birds come at eventide to perch in flocks upon the frail boughs of tamarisk and acacia. Many sea fish make their way upstream to fish in fresh waters, shad, mullet, perch, and labris, and carry their excursions far into the Said. Those species which are not Mediterranean came originally, still come annually, from the heart of Ethiopia, with the inundation of the Nile, including 2 kinds of alestes, the eld turtle, the Bagris dogmak, and the mormoris. Some attain to a gigantic size, the Bagris bayad and the turtle to about 1 yard, the lattice to 3.5 yards in length, while others, such as the shilris, or catfish, are noted for their electric properties. Nature seems to have made the fayaka, the globefish, in a fit of playfulness. It is a long fish from beyond the cataracts, and it is carried by the Nile the more easily on account of the faculty it has of filling itself with air, and inflating its body at will. When swelled out immoderately, the fahaka overbalances and drifts along upside down, its belly to the wind, covered with spikes so that it looks like a hedgehog. During the inundation, it floats with the current from one canal to another, and is cast by the retreating waters upon the muddy fields, where it becomes the prey of birds or of jackals, or serves as a plaything for children. Everything is dependent upon the river: the soil, the produce of the soil, the species of animals it bears, the birds which it feeds, and hence it was the Egyptians placed the river among their gods. They personified it as a man with regular features, and a vigorous and portly body, such as befits the rich of high lineage. His breasts, fully developed like those of a woman, though less firm, hang heavily upon a wide bosom where the fat lies in folds. A narrow girdle, whose end falls free about the thighs, supports his spacious abdomen, and his attire is completed by sandals and a close-fitting headdress, generally surmounted with a crown of water plants. Sometimes water springs from his breast, sometimes he presents a frog or libation vases, or holds a bundle of the crucis ansado, as symbols of life, or bears a flat tray full of offerings, bunches of flowers, ears of corn, heaps of fish, and geese tied together by the feet. The inscriptions call him Hapi, Father of the gods, Lord of sustenance, who maketh food to be, and covereth the two lands of Egypt with his products, who giveth life, banisheth want, and filleth the granaries to overflowing. He is evolved into two personages, one being sometimes colored red and the other blue. The former, who wears a cluster of lotus flowers upon his head, presides over the Egypt of the south. The latter has a bunch of papyrus for his headdress and watches over the delta. Two goddesses, corresponding to the two Hapis, Mirit Kemate for Upper and Mirit Mehit for Lower Egypt, personified the banks of the river. They are often represented as standing with outstretched arms, as though begging for the water which should make them fertile. The Nile god had his chapel in every province, and priests whose right it was to bury all bodies of men or beasts cast up by the river, for the god had claimed them, and to his servants they belonged. Several towns were dedicated to him: Hat-Hapi, Nuit-Hapi, Nilopolis. It was told in the Theobad how the god dwelt within a grotto, or shrine, Taphit, in the island of Biga, whence he issued at the inundation. This tradition dates from a time when the cataract was believed to be at the end of the world, and to bring down the heavenly river upon earth. Two yawning gulfs, Koriti, at the foot of the two granite cliffs, Moniti, between which it ran, gave access to this mysterious retreat. A bas-relief from Philae represents blocks of stone piled one above another, the vulture of the south and the hawk of the north, each perched on a summit, wearing a panther skin, with both arms upheld in adoration. The statue is mutilated, the end of the nose, the beard, and part of the tray have disappeared, but are restored in the illustration. The two little birds hanging alongside the geese, together with a bunch of ears of corn, are fat quails, and the circular chamber wherein Hapi crouches concealed, clasping a libation vase in either hand. A single coil of a serpent outlines the contour of this chamber, and leaves a narrow passage between its overlapping head and tail, through which the rising waters may overflow at the time appointed, bringing to Egypt all things good and sweet and pure, whereby gods and men are fed. Towards the summer solstice, at the very moment when the sacred water from the gulfs of Syene reached Silsila, the priest of the place, sometimes the reigning sovereign, or one of his sons, sacrificed a bull and geese, and then cast into the waters a sealed roll of papyrus. This was a written order to do all that might ensure to Egypt the benefits of a normal inundation. When Pharaoh himself deigned to officiate, the memory of the event was preserved by a stela engraved upon the rocks. Even in his absence, the festivals of the Nile were among the most solemn and joyous of the land. According to a tradition transmitted from age to age, the prosperity or adversity of the year was dependent upon the splendor and fervor with which they were celebrated. Had the faithful shown the slightest lukewarmness, the Nile might have refused to obey the command, and failed to spread freely over the surface of the country. Peasants from a distance, each bringing his own provisions, ate their meals together for days, and lived in a state of brutal intoxication as long as this kind of fare lasted. On the great day itself, the priests came forth in procession from the sanctuary, bearing the statue of the god along the banks, to the sound of instruments and the chanting of hymns. 1. Hail to thee, Hapi, who appearest in the land and comest to give life to Egypt, thou who dost hide thy coming in darkness, in this very day whereon thy coming is sung, wave, which spreadest over the orchards created by Ra, to give life to all of them that are athirst, who refusest to give drink unto the desert, of the overflow of the waters of heaven, as soon as thou descendest. Sibu, the earth god, is enamoured of bread. Napri, the god of grain, presents his offering. Ptah maketh every workshop to prosper. 2. Lord of the fish, as soon as he passeth the cataract, the birds no longer descend upon the fields. Creator of corn, maker of barley, he prolongeth the existence of temples. Do his fingers cease from their labours, or doth he suffer? Then are the millions of beings in misery. Doth he wane in heaven? Then the gods themselves and all men perish. 3. The cattle are driven mad, and all the world, both great and small, are in torment. But if, on the contrary, the prayers of men are heard at this rising, and for them he maketh himself Knumu, when he ariseth, then the earth shouts for joy. Then are all bellies joyful. Each back is shaken with laughter, and every tooth grindeth. 4. Bringing food, rich in sustenance, Creator of all good things, Lord of all seeds of life, pleasant unto his elect. If his friendship is secured, he produceth fodder for the cattle, and he provideth for the sacrifices of all the gods. Finer than any other is the incense which cometh from him. He taketh possession of the 2 lands, and the granaries are filled, the storehouses are prosperous, and the goods of the poor are multiplied. 5. He is at the service of all prayers to answer them, withholding nothing. To make boats to be, that is his strength. Stones are not sculptured for him, nor statues whereon the double crown is placed. He is unseen. No tribute is paid unto him, and no offerings are brought unto him. He is not charmed by words of mystery. The place of his dwelling is unknown, nor can his shrine be found by virtue of magic writings. 6. There is no house large enough for thee, nor any who may penetrate within thy heart. Nevertheless the generations of thy children rejoice in thee, for thou dost rule as a king, whose decrees are established for the whole earth, who is manifest in presence of the people of the south and of the north, by whom the tears are washed from every eye, and who is lavish of his bounties. 7. Where sorrow was, there doth break forth joy, and every heart rejoiceth. Sovku, the crocodile, the child of Nit, leaps for gladness, for the 9 gods who accompany thee have ordered all things. The overflow giveth drink unto the fields, and maketh all men valiant. One man taketh to drink of the labour of another, without charge being brought against him. 8. If thou dost enter in the midst of songs to go forth in the midst of gladness, if they dance with joy when thou comest forth of the unknown, it is that thy heaviness is death and corruption, and when thou art implored to give the water of the year, the people of the Theobad and the north are seen side by side, each man with the tools of his trade. None tarrieth behind his neighbour. Of all those who clothe themselves, no man clotheth himself with festive garments. The children of thought, the god of riches, no longer adorn themselves with jewels, nor the 9 gods, but they are in the night. As soon as thou hast answered by the rising, each one anointeth himself with perfumes. 9. Establisher of true riches, desire of men, here are seductive words in order that thou mayest reply. If thou dost answer mankind by waves of the heavenly ocean, Napri, the grain god, presents his offering. All the gods adore thee. The birds no longer descend upon the hills, though that which thy hand formeth were of gold, or in the shape of a brick of silver. It is not lapis lazuli that we eat, but wheat is of more worth than precious stones. 10. They have begun to sing unto thee upon the harp. They sing unto thee keeping time with their hands, and the generations of thy children rejoice in thee, and they have filled thee with salutations of praise. For it is the God of riches who adorneth the earth, who maketh barks to prosper in the sight of men, who rejoiceth the heart of women with child, who loveth the increase of the flocks. 11. When thou art risen in the city of the prince, then is the rich man filled. The small man, the poor, disdaineth the lotus. All is solid and of good quality. All herbage is for his children. Doth he forget to give food? prosperity forsaketh the dwellings, and earth falleth into a wasting sickness. End of section 4. Chapter 1. The Nile and Egypt, Part 5. The word Nile is of uncertain origin. We have it from the Greeks, and they took it from a people foreign to Egypt, either from the Phoenicians, the Khiti, the Libyans, or from people of Asia Minor. When the Egyptians themselves did not care to treat their river as the god Hapi, they called it the sea, or the Great River. They had 20 terms or more by which to designate the different phases which it assumed according to the seasons, but they would not have understood what was meant had one spoken to them of the Nile. The name Egypt also is part of the Hellenic tradition. Perhaps it was taken from the temple name of Memphis, Ikufta, which barbarian coast tribes of the Mediterranean must long have had ringing in their ears as that of the most important and wealthiest town to be found upon the shores of their sea. The Egyptians called themselves Bomitu, Botu, and their country Kemet, the Black Land. Whence came they? How far off in time are we to carry back the date of their arrival? The oldest monuments hitherto known scarcely transport us further than 6,000 years, yet they are of an art so fine, so well determined in its main outlines, and reveal so ingeniously combined a system of administration, government, and religion, that we infer a long past of accumulated centuries behind them. It must always be difficult to estimate exactly the length of time needful for a race as gifted as were the ancient Egyptians to rise from barbarism into a high degree of culture. Nevertheless, I do not think that we shall be misled in granting them 40 or 50 centuries wherein to bring so complicated an achievement to a successful issue, and in placing their first appearance at 8 or 10,000 years before our era. Their earliest horizon was a very limited one. Their gaze might wander westward over the ravine-furrowed plains of the Libyan desert, without reaching that fabled land of Manu where the sun set every evening. But looking eastward from the valley, they could see the peak of Baku, which marked the limit of regions accessible to man. Beyond these regions lay the beginnings of Tonutri, the land of the gods, and the breezes passing over it were laden with its perfumes, and sometimes wafted them to mortals lost in the desert. Northward the world came to an end towards the lagoons of the delta, whose inaccessible islands were believed to be the sojourning place of souls after death. As regards the south, precise knowledge of it scarcely went beyond the defiles of Gebel Silsila, where the last remains of the granite threshold had perhaps not altogether disappeared. The district beyond Gebel Silsila, the province of Konusit, was still a foreign and almost mythic country, directly connected with heaven by means of the cataract. Long after the Egyptians had broken through this restricted circle, the names of those places which had, as it were, marked out their frontiers, continued to be associated in their minds with the idea of the 4 cardinal points. Baku and Manu were still the most frequent expressions for the extreme east and west. Nekhabit and Buto, the most populous towns in the neighborhoods of Gebel Silsila and the ponds of the delta, were set over against each other to designate south and north. It was within these narrow limits that Egyptian civilization struck root and ripened, as in a closed vessel. What were the people by whom it was developed, and the country whence it came, the races to which they belonged, is today unknown. The majority would place their cradle land in Asia, but cannot agree in determining the route which was followed in the immigration to Africa. Some think that the people took the shortest road across the Isthmus of Suez, others give them longer peregrinations and a more complicated itinerary. They would have them cross the straits of Bab el-Mandeb, and then the Assyrian mountains, and spreading northward and keeping along the Nile, finally settle in the Egypt of today. A more minute examination compels us to recognize that the hypothesis of an Asiatic origin, however attractive it may seem, is somewhat difficult to maintain. The bulk of the Egyptian population presents the characteristics of those white races which have been found established from all antiquity on the Mediterranean slope of the Libyan continent,